The ground was already shaking when the doors of the landing pod opened, and I stepped out into a storm of dust before anyone could tell me to wait. Grace Bennett was shouting into her comm behind me, telling the survey team to fall back to the ridge, but I kept walking forward, straight toward the tree line where something huge had just knocked over a transport crate, like it was made of paper. Nobody had warned me it would happen this fast. 3 days earlier, on the ship, the alien liaison named Lyra had sat across from me with her long fingers folded together, trying to explain why this planet was different from every other place humans had landed. She said the survey records showed something called an alpha predator roamed this region, a creature so dangerous that 4 previous teams had turned back without finishing their work. She said the Science Council wanted me briefed properly before I set foot outside the ship, because they did not want another accident. I remember laughing when she said the word dangerous, not because I thought she was wrong, but because I had heard that word so many times before that it had stopped meaning anything to me. Every planet had something that called itself the top of the food chain. Every planet had a creature that thought it owned the ground it walked on. Lyra had not laughed with me. She had tilted her head, the way her people do when they are studying something they do not understand, and asked me a question I still remember word for word. If you already know what fear feels like, why does none of it show on your face? I told her that fear was not the problem. Fear was useful. It kept you alive if you listened to it the right way. The problem was letting fear decide what you could and could not survive, and I had stopped letting it do that a long time ago. She had asked me then, quietly, which predator I had already survived to make me talk like that. I did not answer her right away. I told her she would understand once we landed. Now, standing at the edge of that tree line with dust in my eyes and the ground still trembling under my boots, I finally understood why she had looked so uneasy back on the ship. The creature that came out from between the trees was taller than the transport crate it had just destroyed. Its skin looked like dark stone that had somehow learned how to move, and when it turned its head toward me, I saw 6 eyes open in a slow, deliberate line across its face, each one locking onto me one after another like it was counting something. Grace's voice cracked through my earpiece, telling me to get back to the ridge immediately, that the readings on her scanner were off the chart, that nothing was worth staying out here for. I did not move yet. The creature took 1 step forward, and the ground under my boots shifted with the weight of it. I could hear the low rumble in its chest, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside the rock itself. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, and for a moment, I let myself feel that fear fully, the way I always did, because pretending it was not there had never once kept anyone alive. Then I did what I had always done. I took the fear and I put it where it belonged, in the back of my mind where it could sharpen my focus, instead of freezing my legs. Lyra's voice came through the comm next, softer than Grace's, more careful. She asked me if I could see it now, and I understood exactly what she meant. I told her I could. The creature let out a sound that shook the leaves off the nearest trees, and it started moving faster now, closing the distance between us with long, heavy strides that did not look rushed, but somehow covered ground faster than I expected. I stepped sideways, toward the broken transport crate, using it as cover while I reached for the signal flare clipped to my belt. Grace was still shouting for me to retreat, but retreating in a straight line was the worst thing I could do here, and I knew it. I had learned that lesson a long time ago, back on Earth, in places far from any comfortable classroom, where the things that hunted us did not follow straight lines either. I circled around the crate instead, keeping it between me and the creature, buying myself a few seconds to think. The creature slammed 1 massive limb into the crate, sending metal fragments flying past my shoulder, and I felt the heat of the impact even from a few steps away. This was not going to be solved by running. I knew that now with total certainty. I lit the flare and threw it hard, off to the side, away from where I was standing, and the creature's head snapped toward the bright light immediately. Every predator I had ever studied, on every planet I had ever walked, shared one weakness in common. Sudden movement and sudden light pulled their attention even faster than sound did, because their instincts were built to react to anything that might be prey trying to escape. The creature lunged toward the flare, giving me the opening I needed, and I sprinted low across the open ground toward the ridge, where Grace and the rest of the team were waiting, with the transport ready. My legs burned with every step, my chest felt tight, and I could hear the creature roaring behind me as it realized the flare was not what it was looking for. The ground shook again as it turned, and I knew it was faster than me. I knew that from the moment I first saw it move, but I also knew something it did not. I was not running blind. I had already studied the slope of this ridge from the ship's scans before we landed. I knew there was a narrow gap between two large rock formations just ahead, wide enough for a person to slip through, but far too narrow for something the size of that creature to follow without slowing down. I reached the gap with the creature closing in behind me, close enough now that I could feel the ground trembling under its weight with every stride it took. I threw myself sideways into the narrow space between the rocks, scraping my shoulder hard against the stone, and I heard the creature slam into the rock formation behind me, unable to fit through the gap at full speed. For one long second, everything went quiet, except for my own breathing and the low growl of the creature on the other side of the rocks, searching for another way around. Grace's voice came through the comm again, this time with real relief in it, telling me the transport was ready and asking me to move toward the ridge as fast as I could. I did not need to be told twice. I pushed myself up and ran the rest of the way, my legs shaking with exhaustion, until I reached the top of the ridge where the team was waiting. Lyra was there too, standing near the transport with her hands still folded together, watching me with an expression I had not seen on her before. It was not fear anymore. It was something closer to understanding. She asked me, once I had caught my breath, if this was what I meant when I said I had already survived something like this before. I told her the truth. I told her that where I came from, humans had spent thousands of years being hunted by creatures that were faster, stronger, and better built for survival than we were in almost every way. We did not win those encounters because we were the strongest thing in the fight. We won because we learned to think faster than the things that were trying to catch us, because we learned to use fire and tools and traps and teamwork long before we ever became strong enough to face those predators directly. I told her that every planet we had visited since leaving our own world had something that called itself an apex predator, and every single time, the pattern was the same. The creature was bigger, faster, and more dangerous in a straight fight than we were. And every single time, we found a way through anyway, not because we stopped being afraid, but because we learned exactly how to work with that fear instead of letting it control us. Lyra looked out toward the tree line, where the creature was still pacing on the other side of the rock formation, unable to reach us now that we had put real distance between ourselves and its territory. She asked me quietly if I thought it would ever stop hunting us, now that it had seen what we could do. I told her that predators do not stop hunting just because one attempt failed. They adapt, they learn, and so do we, every single time, a little faster than they do. The transport door closed behind us, and as we lifted off the ground, I looked back one more time at the creature standing at the edge of the tree line, watching us leave. It was not defeated. It was simply waiting for the next chance. I understood that feeling better than anyone else on that ship. Grace asked me later, once we were safely back above the planet's surface, why I had walked out toward that creature in the first place, instead of waiting for a proper plan. I told her the plan had already been in my head the moment Lyra first warned me about it back on the ship, because I had spent my whole life learning how creatures like that thought, moved, and hunted, long before this planet ever came into the picture. Lyra sat quietly beside me for the rest of the trip, occasionally glancing over as if she were still trying to understand something about me that did not fit neatly into anything she had studied before. Finally, near the end of the journey, she asked me one last question. She wanted to know how many more predators like that one existed back on my homeworld, the kind that could shake the ground with a single step and disappear into the trees without a sound. I smiled, thinking back on all the long nights, all the close calls, all the lessons carved into every generation of my species by creatures that had once seen us as nothing more than easy prey. I told her there were more than she could imagine, and every single one of them had taught us something we would carry with us to every new world we ever set foot on. She did not ask me to name them. She simply nodded, as if she finally understood exactly what she had been warned about long before we ever left the ship.